This week, first up in the enterprise security news, Ativo Networks announces a new integration with IBM Security Resilient. GreatHorn improves email security with better visibility and intelligent protection. Elite Intelligence ascends to the cloud with Recorded Future and Microsoft Azure. Thycotic releases privileged access management capabilities for the new reality of cloud. Datadog has acquired a company that does testing and observability for developer workflows. In our second segment, we air two pre-recorded interviews from Security Weekly Virtual Hacker Summer Camp, which I thought I wasn't going to have to say a lot again, but I just did, with Chris Wysopal from Veracode and Mario Vuxin from Reversing Labs. In our final segment, two more pre-recorded interviews from Security Weekly Virtual Hacker Summer Camp with Danny Jenkins from ThreatLocker and Stefan Boyer from BitSight. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Today, every business is a digital business. Most of us are migrating workloads to the cloud, adopting DevOps tools, rolling out RPA software, and supporting a remote workforce. While opportunity is great, so is the risk of advanced cyber attacks. Many high-profile breaches start with a compromise of privileged credentials. CyberArk is the #1 leader in privileged access management. Talk to CyberArk today to secure privileged access for humans and machines across hybrid and cloud environments and on endpoints. Learn more at securityweekly.com/CyberArk and stay one step ahead of the attackers. Detecting and responding to threats in the cloud is harder than doing it on-prem. Even when you do have the visibility you need, legacy security workflows weren't designed for the speed and complexity of cloud environments. Cloud-native security solutions from ExtraHop are purpose-built to spot threats across the hybrid attack surface, provide detailed investigation steps, and help you automate response. Request your 30-day free trial at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Welcome to episode 194 of Enterprise Security Weekly for August 12th, 2020. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined by Matt Alderman. Matt, welcome.
Wow, it's Wednesday already again. Whew.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Time for ESW. Make sure you join our mailing list for webcast and virtual training announcements to receive your personal invite to our Discord server. Go to securityweekly.com/subscribe. Join the list, join our Discord server, and subscribe to all our shows all in one place. If you have a specific guest or topic you want covered on our shows, you can make your suggestion at securityweekly.com/guests. Complete that form, and we will review all of the submissions on a regular basis. Alrighty. Matt, we got some news to talk about. Not a whole lot.
I mean, there were some interesting announcements. There's a couple analyst discussions in here, which I thought were interesting.
I put those in there just for you. Did you see the?
Yeah. And I did find a couple other, little announcements around ServiceNow and Blue Mira, who took some funding yesterday that didn't get caught in your news feeds, but
I see that.
Nice. Yeah, a couple of things. Yeah.
We'll start with kind of acquisitions and stuff to kind of tease out some of the product announcements, right? And Perimeter 81. Why does that sound familiar? We've covered these folks before, I want to say.
I think so. They just completed a $40 million Series B led by Insight Partners. Right now, a lot of us know Insight Partners from at Tenable because Insight came in and did the Series B there and really took that to the next level. So here they are again coming in. They've been doing a lot of strategic investments in the cybersecurity space. So you're seeing Insight Partners really get involved. I did go over and check them out. I don't know if I've covered them before or not.
Yeah,
but we covered aspects of this last week when I was talking to Richard Steinen from IT Harvest on the death of the firewall and the VPN.
Right. It says in the article, they're disrupting traditional VPN and firewall markets, which, I mean, if there's ever a ripe market to disrupt in security, it's VPN and firewalls.
Exactly. And one of the interesting questions that came out of the Discord channel during that conversation last week was, so who's going to buy Zscaler first, Palo Alto or Checkpoint? Which I think is a very valid question because, as Richard said, Zscaler is in a really interesting position. What I think Perimeter 81 is doing is looking to displace Zscaler as the alternative solution in this space. So the reason I thought this was a really interesting timing and announcement is very relevant to last week's conversations about the firewall and VPN market, and is Zscaler really the only player in the space? Looks like Perimeter 81 is coming in to try to take aspects of that Zscaler market away. Maybe that's the better Palo Alto or Checkpoint acquisition, but we'll see.
Right. Could be. Outstanding. ServiceNow, what is they're offering us notes of some kind?
Yeah, I thought this, we cover these occasionally. We covered one before. And what you have is you have public companies offering a kind of preferred debt round. They're raising debt, which means they're adding cash to the books to allow them to continue to do strategic activities, acquisitions, other things, right? And we've seen ServiceNow do some really interesting acquisitions over the past few weeks, months with COVID and the lockdown. And so now what you're seeing is them raising some more cash as a debt vehicle here, maybe to support other investments down the road. What it's doing, there's a couple interesting pieces in here. One is it's paying out 1.4% interest on this debt, which is going to be used to replace older debt that was at a 0% rate. So it's interesting, right? They're raising money to pay off some of the old debt. Okay, but they're going to pay 1.4% interest. Now, anybody watching at home realizes your bank account's probably doing what, 0.05% if you're in a major bank. If you're in a credit union, you might see 1%. So it's interesting the way the debt is structured. It's actually pretty advantageous to think about it as a way to move some cash and get some interest off of it. So I thought it was just the structure of the deal was interesting.
It is interesting. There were two of the market kind of recaps that were more about the stock than it was about the company, but interesting because Tenable was in there,
right?
And I haven't been keeping tabs on what they're doing recently, but it's still, in skimming that article, it seemed like they were all in on vulnerability management. I mean, we established that you got to make a pivot basically at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to. When I read the article, I also went back and I looked at their earnings report. And so he makes some statements in here, but when I extrapolate it out, I'm not sure I fully agree with him. And
Right.
Qualys beat expectations, and their stock took a beating.
Sorry, not a pivot.
This week.
I think an expansion, further
Right.
capabilities in an closely adjacent space to vulnerability management, like we've talked about with Rapid7 and Qualys. I've done a fantastic job at that.
Yeah, so in here, I just got to point out a couple things. Tenable has seen strong improvements in free cash flow and recently achieved non-GAAP operating income. Correct. But their bookings are down to 13%. Even though I think their revenue growth was like 26%, their bookings is 13%. See, bookings is a future predictor of revenue because they book the money and they rev rec it over time, right? So I've seen this trend with Tenable that even though their revenue numbers are staying above 20%. They're coming down. I'm more concerned that their booking numbers are coming down at a faster pace, which is a future predictor of potential revenue.
Which could mean they're just closing bigger deals, basically.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But you don't know, right? And so I get a little concerned. And again, we've seen their competitors pivot into adjacency spaces and continue to grow.
And done very well in those spaces, I might add, on both accounts with Rapid7 and Qualys.
Yeah, so I get a ton of pings from the financial advisors on this topic and these three companies because they're like, what's really going on under the cover? So it'll be interesting. I don't have as positive a result from this article than is portrayed.
Yeah,
you got to dig in the numbers.
I want to see the big announcement from Tenable that they're jumping into another space, right?
Yeah. Agreed.
CrowdStrike,
and then there's
different story there, right? I think I don't know, as an investor, if you got in early, as you know, again, if you had a crystal ball, right, you're doing great with CrowdStrike, but they're a fierce competitor in the market, right? And a lot of people have very positive things to say about CrowdStrike and the effectiveness of the product, so that always brings positive light when we talk about those types of vendors on the show.
Right. And I think CrowdStrike benefits from the remote worker, remote environment differently than like a Tenable, for example, right? I mean, when that machine goes home, unless you're deploying agents, are you really scanning it or not? But the endpoint market, and I think to CrowdStrike's benefit is, look, people are looking to extend their endpoint security into these new devices. That creates a really interesting growth. Every CISO I've talked to that has CrowdStrike absolutely loves it, right? And you're seeing that in their financial results. So this article I thought was really interesting because it's bringing a lot of really good data to the table, showing why CrowdStrike is doing well. The previous article didn't get into the same level of detail. And if you did, you'd be like, is it really that good of an investment or not? CrowdStrike, I think, definitely is a good investment.
Agreed. Ativo Networks has announced new integrations and integration with IBM Security Resilient. This was Resilient Security that IBM bought, right? It was basically their case management is what it started out as, and then it made that, again, as we talk about, that pivot into an adjacency market into SOAR, right? That was, if I remember correctly.
The original product was actually a breach notification product. It was spun out, I think, from EMC. I think it's some former EMC folks.
Bruce Schneier was he one of the original founders?
Yes.
He was or did he?
No, they brought him in later.
Okay.
No, Bruce, the CEO. I can't remember Bruce's name off the top of my head, but he was former EMC, and they went out and they built this breach notification platform. That was Resilient's original market. Then they went out and recruited Bruce Schneier to come over, and they turned it into more of a broader incident response, a case management system, which ultimately evolved into IBM SOAR.
Right. Yeah. Which is where a lot of those types of vendors were pivoting into, because they had the basic foundation. It was an easy adjacency to add those capabilities.
Exactly right. So now what you have is the integration with Ativo's deception technology here, right? I think it's their threat defend bot sync, which is integrated in to help identify, potential issues from a SOAR perspective in the incident response workflow. I mean, what I've seen from Ativo is some very interesting deception use cases, right? When you think deception, you think, honeypots and in certain things, right? But when you look at what Ativo's done, I think it's really interesting. They've gone after a lot of different use cases and how deception can be applied in those different use cases, where some of the other deception vendors might be a little more single-threaded. This is a specific integration. I'm curious where the other potential Ativo integrations fit in to something like, the Resilient SOAR product from IBM.
I see. The bot sync is a whole set of deception technologies, endpoints, application data, Active Directory. So it's both, sounds like tokens and I believe Ativo's container and a mixture of other kind of decoys and how they deploy.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways they deploy and a lot of different scenarios and use cases they go after.
Let's see. GreatHorn improves email security. I wasn't sure if this was an announcement or if it was something new from them or not.
Yeah. So when I read it, it says they've added. It's a combination of their email security stack with intelligent phishing detection and response capability. So I think it is a product announcement that they've added some phishing detection response capabilities natively into the overall stack. That's what it looked like when I read it.
Gotcha. I mean, I thought they had some of that already, but
I thought so too. So that's why I can't. Yeah, but it
still
looks
a great solution, though. I tell you what, in speaking with the GreatHorn folks, I mean, if your email is hosted in the cloud, which either you're heading there or you're already there, right? You're probably Office 365 or mostly Office 365, right? Or hosted email or some hosted exchange, right? You want to have the API integration into a security solution. I mean, it's just architecturally, that's a no-brainer. You should be shopping for that. Long gone are the SMTP relays, right?
Yeah.
In that solution, we still need them to send the email, but we don't need them to solve this problem, right?
Right.
GitLab auto merging requests was one from Sonotype.
Yeah, I thought this one was a little interesting because Dunk is over at GitLab now, and it was funny. I just pinged him yesterday, and we're trying to get some time scheduled. And GitLab's been doing some really interesting stuff. So you've got GitHub, GitLab. There was one other one in this triad. I can't remember who the other one was, but the ability to integrate some of the things that GitLab's doing. GitLab's been building a lot of DevOps capabilities. This is more on the merge request side, but they're also building out some other CI/CD pipeline workflows and integrating some other security checks into it. So I'm really interested to see, when I talk to Dunk, hopefully next week, is kind of where GitLab's going. So this was kind of an interesting, timely article, as you see there's kind of these three vendors kind of coming together really to solve aspects of the application security and securing the CI/CD pipeline.
Right. At a very high level, it saves developers some steps, right? I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, here's the fix, which then I have to go put into the source code and then make in GitLab, which I have not used as a developer, it's a merge request, right? In a GitHub, it would be a pull request. It's just creating that for you, right? So you can see it. Because, I mean, a lot of times it will just merge in nicely, and we love it when that happens. When it doesn't happen that way, it's complete. And those developers out there know the headache of merging. So it's painful.
I need you and Marcin to test this so you can merge your codes together more efficiently. Please.
Right. Well, GitHub has some of that as well. Well, and there's other tools that help you with it as well. So there's all kinds of integrations. In any case. Yeah, because if we run into a merging issue, it's very bad.
Very bad.
New platform Sonicwall. This was interesting. Sonicwall getting into throwing its hat in the enterprise ring. I really put Sonicwall in the SMB home market, and I'm like, whoa, wait, now they're making announcements in the enterprise. Is everyone trying to steal little bits of Fortinet and Cisco? Could be.
They're all trying to steal bits from Cisco, Fortinet, Palo Alto, and Checkpoint, right?
Right.
See, because they focus on the SMB in the home market, they potentially have this really interesting play in the remote worker teleworking space.
I know. I've said this since the beginning of this horrible pandemic, but one of the things from our perspective is if you could have a device of some kind or something to help protect people in their homes, it's not that much different from protecting them when they're in a hotel and all that other stuff, right? We did a Black Hat interview, micro interview about that as well. With captive portals, the folks from SensePost. Yep. It's the same thing, right?
It basically. So not only are you seeing the enterprise guys trying to figure out how to address aspects of the home, you've got the guys that have focused on the home also showing how they can transcend into this new enterprise environment. So I dug into it a little bit because I'm like, okay, what does this announcement mean?
Do I have to send everyone a firewall? That's the scenario everyone's trying to avoid, right?
Yes. I think there's still hardware in play here. It's hard to tell. But in their remote worker package, there's one of their solutions is with threats anywhere, you must be everywhere. Here's our workforce solution. But it's really 6 products. It's secure remote access, cloud app security, endpoint protection, advanced threat protection, next generation firewalls, and secure email. So what they're doing is they're bundling a bunch of their products together after this remote workforce, I think, solution. The question to me is how integrated is it? How easy is it to deploy? Because remember, we're dealing with people that may not have the technical or security skill set. So I want to see how it's packaged and bundled. That's the one thing I didn't get to in the solution.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, some of it comes down to just hardware versus software, right? I mean, get a hardware device and you plug it in. But the thing is, if it's software, you can bypass it because it's living in software. But the thing is, okay, let's say you've got 40,000. Just pick a random number. You've got 40,000 users, right? And you're supporting 40,000 laptops or computers for those now remote users, right? Let's just say they're all remote. Now you got to add 40,000 new devices to that mix and have to support 2 things for every user. And you may also support some phones and other devices in there too. Now you just keep multiplying and it gets to be a nightmare.
Yep, very much so.
Thycotic releases privilege access management capabilities for the cloud.
I mean, they had to go here. I mean, CyberArk's already been there, right? I mean,
I feel like we've covered this announcement for everyone else in their space.
Yeah, exactly right. They have to. I mean, we've had CyberArk on and the Conjure folks and where they're going and all the great capabilities. I mean, Thycotic had to do this. I mean, they have to play catch up in some respects.
Yep. Do they have a vaulting technology?
Yeah, it's called Secret Server. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I did the integration with both CyberArk and Thycotic back in
with
like 2010 when I was like Qualys. No, I did
Qualys,
it at Qualys first.
Gotcha.
We had to do it for policy compliance because you needed credentials to do the policy compliance scans, and everybody wanted integrations with a vault, so we had to do the integrations with both CyberArk and Thycotic back in the day.
Datadog is in the news. They are a sponsor on Security Weekly, and Michael from Vicarious talks very highly of Datadog. He's like, I love their model of their company. He's singing their praises. So, and they just bought Undefined Labs, a testing and observability company for developer workflows.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting here is they're trying to, so Datadog's primarily been on the runtime side, right? Monitoring all the things that are going on with the application environment and bringing that telemetry back. That's been their big niche and benefit. What they're trying to do now is with this acquisition, move a little before the runtime. Where I see this really playing in is kind of at your interactive security testing side to understand potential performance or other issues during testing before the stuff moves into production. So they're starting to move pre-deployment, and it looks very heavy on the testing side, is where they're going to do some integrations here with the Undefined Labs acquisition.
You know, it's interesting. It came up last week too. The integration of security into QA.
Yeah.
Because you can test that stuff before it goes into that. In my mind, that's where I've always felt it should be, right? I mean, you do have to monitor it in production, but if you can uncover stuff in QA, the more monitoring that you do in your QA environments and test environments, the better, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen solutions that focus only on, kind of the code pre-deployment side, others that focus on after deployment runtime side. There is a balance here that has to be done between the two. There are certain things you can do pre-production and try to remove issues before it goes into production, but you still have to monitor production for drift and other things that are not part of what you're testing statically. So the two definitely have to come together.
It's a hard space because like the developer phase, you're looking at the source code, so you can get a pretty good sense of coverage in your code, like how much of the code did I test for security vulnerabilities? What's my coverage in the code? When you move into production, your users are using it, so they're generating all the alerts. Attackers are attacking it, so like your coverage is pretty good for the usage in production. And that's where you want to monitor. The customization to get your application to really get a good workout in QA or security testing is really where I think the challenges lie, right? I mean, we have that challenge with our software. Scripting how you would go through a bunch of things that you would normally do in our software is a pain to maintain. And tried to maintain unit tests knows for larger applications, certainly it's a huge pain in the butt.
Yeah.
Let's see. JumpCloud app for Windows. I've heard of JumpCloud before. Why does that? It like rang a bell.
So JumpCloud's a Boulder, Colorado-based company. They were one of the early, I think, funding sources for AutoMox early on. Jay knows the JumpCloud guys really, really well because I think they worked together.
They've come up before. Yeah.
What JumpCloud's trying to do is address directory services when Active Directory is not in the mix, right?
That's how I know them. Yes, because I was looking at directory services. Yep. And this one was, JumpCloud was actually really high up as an alternative to Active Directory.
Exactly. So what they do is they build this directory in the cloud, and they really went after hybridized environments that had a lot of Linux and Mac in it, and maybe didn't have Active Directory, and LDAP's a pain in the butt to manage. So this solution was really interesting. This announcement intrigues me a bit because it's now supporting some of this capabilities in Windows, and so if you're Windows, are you using Active Directory or aren't you? Is this an alternative to AD? Because they've done things with Mac and Linux earlier. Windows is kind of now the next one in the profile here.
Right.
So I just thought it was an interesting announcement because they're definitely going after Active Directory and Azure AD, for example, as a replacement for Windows, especially in a highly hybridized endpoint environment.
Right. I'd be interested to see a comparison in the security aspects of that, because we know the the ins and outs of the vulnerabilities that are inherent in Active Directory. Curious to see what JumpCloud's done in that area. It's interesting.
If we could only get the Javelin guys back to actually
take a look at that, right? Or someone yeah. Clarity and Checkpoint are partnering for industrial control networks. I want to say we've covered kind of these pivots of Checkpoint into ICS in the past, and now they're partnering with one of the major players in that space as well in terms of security providers for ICS, right?
Yeah, and I've also seen some with Fortinet as well. So you see the firewall vendors moving into the space a little bit to try to put some capabilities in front of maybe some of these ICS environments. It's interesting. We know the OT vendors, right? Clarity being one of them, and this integration of IT. It's interesting though. It's integrated into Checkpoint's Internet of Things Protect solution. Now, you can define IoT a lot of different ways, and industrial IoT and ICS and SCADA and all this other stuff. It's always an interesting conversation because everybody defines it a little bit differently. When I think of IoT, I'm thinking more consumer IoT, not necessarily industrial control systems. But IoT, put that aside for a second,
indicates the Internet of Things. If you think of a SCADA device, I mean, we hope it's not connected to the internet, right? But obviously, obviously they end up connected to the internet, right? So that's where I think some of the terminology gets its wires crossed. Case in point, the Israeli water plant that was attacked. It was 4G modems that were attached to some of the SCADA gear.
Right. And so I think you're going to see a lot of this alignment with traditional OT, operational technology vendors like the Clarities, the Indiges, the Dragoses, the Nozomi Networks. There's a few of them out there, right? There are a handful of them. Working closely with more of your traditional IT security vendors because you're starting to see this kind of integration between the two. And so I think we'll see more announcements similar to this. What I'm unsure of how well does Checkpoint solution work versus a waterfall security that is more of a traditional ICS kind of firewall technology. It's a little more specific to the OT and ICS environment, where Checkpoint's a little more general purpose. So I'm not quite sure the value in each of these integrations and which vendors are going to do better than others.
Let's see. Let's just quickly recap what's coming up next. Matt, you did an interview with Chris Wysopal from Veracode.
Yes. Yeah, it was an interesting, I haven't talked to Chris in a few years. The last time, I think we decided it was Gartner Security and Risk in 2016. And at that time, they were only doing static analysis, right? And then Veracode's gone through some iterations.
Changing of hands and expanded their product portfolio, though. Yeah.
So it was great to catch up with Chris on some of the challenges and trends from a security perspective. You see the portfolio expanding into IAST and DAST technologies beyond just static analysis. It was very educational. It was a great opportunity to catch up with Chris and see where the Veracode team was.
I did an interview with Mario Vuxen of Reversing Labs, which was awesome. So, and I've actually used the Reversing Labs platform before, and it's awesome at providing you intelligence for malicious, malware samples or what have you. I think what Mario was really kind of focused on was, I always thought Reversing Labs had this great telemetry about the malware, like its footprint, its everything about it. It was a great report to read. He's actually taken some of that data and allowed you to operationalize it, so you can feed that into your operations, right? Because basically what it came down to, I was like, I do malware analysis, and I was like, the sample's kind of interesting, and you go read the Reversing Labs report on it, it tells you everything about it, and that was a manual process. What he's doing is automating that. So that was awesome. Danny Jenkins.
And we leveraged that integration at Tenable, right? Because we were looking to see if something was known to be malicious, we'd flag it as part of the scan. So we had a great integration with them back in the day.
Danny Jenkins, the CEO of ThreatLocker, very interesting, not whitelisting, but looking at the processes and executables on Windows systems and really focusing on mapping out what it should do and blocking everything else and giving you all the controls to do that, which is an interesting approach. We're seeing this diversion in the market from whitelisting to this really smart whitelisting, because you can analyze these executables and binaries and figure out what they're supposed to do and basically block everything else, but have some control over that as well. And then Matt, Stephen Boyer.
Yeah, so Stephen Boyer and I had an interesting conversation from BitSight. We think of BitSight as the scoring company, right? You look at your external assets, you understand where there's potential issues, vulnerabilities, and you put a score around it. What was interesting was how they've adapted the data they already have from scanning the internet for something like 20 years to actually address the remote worker potential threat profile. Mm-hmm. And what they're doing is, when a user connects to a VPN, they're grabbing that public IP address they're coming from and able to correlate the other threat intelligence data that they have into understanding the overall potential risk to the organization. Because
that's cool.
Yeah, the hardest thing organizations are struggling with right now is they don't know how risky the home user environment is. So by collecting those public IPs, bringing them in, they're now able to really understand the potential threat profile of these remote workers. Their use cases were interesting. They went after kind of the executive use case first. Mm-hmm. Like, I've got all these executives signing in from home. Where are they coming in from? Are they susceptible to attacks? It can expand into all the remote workers. They also do a scenario with third-party vendors that are now also working remotely and signing into your network from home. So interesting. They've got the data, but before, how could you correlate, an end user public IP to be able to correlate it? That's what they're doing. It was a great conversation.
Also, scanning the internet is the topic of an upcoming webcast, securityweekly.com/webcast. Todd Beardsley will talk about the report, and all of the data is being made to the public, which is awesome. We've also got a webcast coming up on how to create and run a conference from the geniuses behind Layer 8 and Wild West Hackin' Fest on August 19th. And some technical trainings coming up on August 27th. If you want to learn about Boothole, SIG-RED, and SMB Bleed, you can do that. So go to securityweekly.com/webcast or /on-demand to check out the archive. And now we will transition for you to listen to our interviews from Security Weekly Virtual Hacker Summer Camp.